4 goals, 2 Croatian comebacks, 1 Jude Bellingham masterclass. And somehow, despite winning 4-2, England still managed to give their fans at least a few moments where they were probably checking their blood pressure. When most people see the final score, they assume England dominated from start to finish. But that's not really what happened. This match was far more complicated than the scoreboard suggests. And honestly, that's what makes it so fascinating. Because beneath those 4 England goals was a game full of tactical risks, momentum swings, and a Croatian team that refused to behave like a side that was supposed to lose. The first thing that stood out to me was Thomas Tuchel's approach. This wasn't cautious tournament football. This wasn't England sitting deep and waiting for moments. Tuchel basically told his team, "We're going forward, we're pressing high, and we're forcing Croatia to deal with us." From the opening minutes, England played with aggression. Noni Madueke was attacking defenders directly. Anthony Gordon was stretching the field. Harry Kane kept dropping into midfield. And Jude Bellingham was doing what Jude Bellingham usually does, appearing in places where defenders really wish he wouldn't appear. Now here's the tactical detail many casual fans probably missed. Harry Kane wasn't operating as a traditional number 9. Yes, he scored goals. Yes, he was the striker. But his movement was constantly creating problems for Croatia's center backs. Every time Kane dropped deeper, Croatia had a decision to make. Do you follow him? Or do you hold your position? Neither answer was comfortable. If they followed him, space opened behind the defensive line. If they stayed back, Kane suddenly had time to turn and play forward passes. It's one of those football problems that's a bit like choosing between being caught in traffic or missing your exit. Neither option feels particularly enjoyable, and England exploited that uncertainty throughout the match. The breakthrough came when Noni Madueke won a penalty after forcing Croatia into a mistake. Harry Kane stepped up. His first penalty was saved. But Croatia's goalkeeper had moved off his line too early. Retake. Second attempt. Goal. England 1-0. At that point, many fans probably thought England were about to cruise. Croatia had other ideas. And this is where the game became really interesting. Because Croatia's response revealed something that England supporters should pay attention to moving forward in this tournament. Whenever England lost possession high up the pitch, there were moments when Croatia could attack the spaces behind England's midfield. Those spaces weren't always huge, but at World Cup level, huge spaces aren't required. Elite players can turn small openings into dangerous attacks very quickly. Croatia began finding those openings. Suddenly, England's press wasn't looking quite as dominant. Suddenly, Croatia were progressing through the field. Suddenly, England's defense was being asked difficult questions. And then came the equalizer. Martin Baturina punished England for losing control of a defensive sequence and brought Croatia level. Just like that, the entire mood of the game changed. What had looked like an England procession suddenly became a football match again. And honestly, Croatia deserve enormous credit here. A lot of teams concede first against England and start retreating. Croatia didn't. They kept playing. They kept believing. And more importantly, they kept finding tactical weaknesses they could attack. The problem for Croatia, though, was that while they were exposing England's defensive issues, England were exposing even bigger problems at the other end. So when we left off, Croatia had just equalized, and England suddenly looked a lot less comfortable than the scoreline eventually suggests. And this is where the match took an unexpected turn. Because Croatia didn't just survive England's early pressure, they started asking some serious questions of their own. One of the biggest misconceptions about Croatia over the years is that they're simply a possession team built around technical midfielders. That's true to an extent. But the best Croatian sides have always been incredibly smart in transition. They know exactly when to slow a game down, and they know exactly when to attack quickly. Against England, those transition moments became their most dangerous weapon. Every time England committed numbers forward, Croatia looked for direct routes into attack. Instead of endlessly recycling possession, they tried to reach advanced areas before England could reorganize defensively. And for a while, it worked beautifully. England's high-pressing structure was winning the ball back regularly. The problem was what happened after Croatia escaped that first wave of pressure. Once Croatia broke through England's front line, there were moments where Declan Rice and Elliot Anderson suddenly had huge areas to cover. Now, that's not entirely their fault. That's the risk of aggressive football. If you push your fullbacks higher, if your attacking midfielders are pressing aggressively, if your wingers are hunting defenders, then somebody has to protect the spaces left behind. And England weren't always doing that effectively. Croatia sensed it. They kept attacking those channels. Then came one of the biggest moments of the game. Petar Musa scored, and suddenly Croatia were ahead. Think about that for a second. England had started brighter. England had created more chances. England had more attacking momentum, yet Croatia found themselves leading. Football can be wonderfully unfair sometimes. It's one of the reasons we all keep watching. You can spend 20 minutes creating beautiful attacks and then concede because one defensive transition goes wrong. That's basically football's version of studying for an exam and then getting asked questions from the one chapter you skipped. At this stage, England looked vulnerable, and this is where I think Thomas Tuchel deserves real credit. Many managers panic, some become more cautious, others start making emotional decisions. Tuchel didn't. He trusted the structure, he trusted the process. Most importantly, he trusted his best players. And one player was becoming increasingly influential, Jude Bellingham. Now let's talk about what made Bellingham's performance so special. Because casual fans will focus on the goal, analysts focus on everything else. His movement between Croatia's midfield and defensive lines was outstanding. His timing was exceptional. His ability to receive the ball under pressure completely changed England's attacking rhythm. Whenever Croatia thought they had closed passing lanes, Bellingham appeared. Whenever Croatia thought they had numerical superiority, Bellingham found space. Whenever England needed somebody to carry the ball forward, Bellingham volunteered. It felt like Croatia were trying to solve a tactical puzzle while Bellingham kept changing the pieces. And then came the defining moment. Early in the second half, Bellingham found the breakthrough. His goal wasn't just important because it leveled the score. It was important because of what it did psychologically. You could almost feel the momentum shift. Croatia had worked incredibly hard to gain control. Now they were back level. And England suddenly looked energized again. This is one of those details that statistics don't always capture. Goals change emotions. Goals change confidence. Goals change decision-making. After Bellingham scored, England played with greater authority. Croatia became slightly more cautious. Tiny psychological changes, huge tactical consequences. And over the next phase of the match, England started taking control of areas they had struggled to dominate earlier. The midfield battle was changing, the physical intensity was changing, and Croatia were beginning to feel the effects. At 2-2, this match was balanced on a knife edge. And that's what makes what happened next so important. Because England didn't simply score another goal and get lucky. They gradually squeezed the life out of Croatia through a combination of superior physicality, smarter positioning, and relentless attacking pressure. This was the point where England started looking like a genuine World Cup contender, not because they were perfect, far from it, but because they showed something elite teams need in major tournaments. The ability to adapt when Plan A isn't working perfectly. And a huge part of that adaptation came through Harry Kane. Now, Kane's 2 goals will grab headlines, but honestly, his movement was probably more important than his finishing. Throughout the second half, Croatia's defenders looked increasingly uncomfortable dealing with him. When Kane stayed high, he occupied center backs. When Kane dropped deeper, he created overloads in midfield. When Kane drifted sideways, he pulled defenders out of position. It was like trying to mark a striker who had secretly decided he also wanted to be a number 10, a midfielder, and occasionally a tactical consultant. Croatia never fully solved the problem, and here's why. Modern football is obsessed with structure. Defenders like knowing where opponents are supposed to be. Managers like predictable positioning. Defensive systems rely on organization. Kane's movement constantly disrupted that organization. Every time a defender stepped forward, space opened behind. Every time a defender stayed back, Kane received the ball freely. It became a lose-lose situation, and England's attacking players started exploiting those gaps more effectively as the game progressed. Then there's Jude Bellingham, because while Kane was creating the problems, Bellingham was often the player attacking the solutions. One thing I noticed was how frequently Bellingham arrived in dangerous areas at exactly the right moment. Not too early, not too late. Exactly when Croatia's defensive shape was beginning to stretch. That's a skill that doesn't always show up in data models. You can measure distance covered. You can measure passes completed. You can measure expected goals. It's much harder to measure football intelligence, and Bellingham has an enormous amount of it. The longer the match continued, the more Croatia struggled to contain him. Now let's talk about Croatia's midfield, because this is where age and tournament football can sometimes collide. Luka Modric remains one of the greatest midfielders of his generation. His vision remains elite, his passing remains elite, his football IQ remains elite. But World Cup matches aren't won on reputation, they're won on what happens over 90 minutes. And during the final stages, England's younger midfield started covering more ground, winning more second balls, and recovering possession more frequently. This wasn't about Modric suddenly becoming a poor player, far from it. This was about England increasing the game's intensity until Croatia found it difficult to keep up physically. That's a subtle distinction, and it's an important one. Because Croatia's tactical ideas remained sound, their execution simply became harder as fatigue increased. Then came another critical factor: depth. Tournament football often becomes a battle between starting 11s. Elite tournament football becomes a battle between squads. England's bench gave them fresh energy, fresh legs, fresh pressing, fresh running power. Meanwhile, Croatia looked increasingly stretched, and when tired defenders face fresh attackers, bad things usually happen. Eventually, Harry Kane struck again. England regained the lead. And from that moment, Croatia were chasing the game. That's always dangerous against a team with England's attacking talent, because now the spaces become larger, the risks become greater, and England suddenly had exactly the type of game state they wanted. Croatia had to push forward. England could attack open spaces. That's football's version of opening every window in your house during a storm and then acting surprised when everything starts flying around. Croatia had no choice. But England were ready to punish it. So by the final stages of this match, Croatia were in a difficult position. Not because they had played badly, not because they lacked courage, and certainly not because they stopped competing. They were in trouble because England had forced the game into the exact situation they wanted. Croatia needed a goal. England had space to attack, and that's usually a dangerous combination. As Croatia pushed more players forward, the defensive structure that had already been under pressure started stretching even further. The distances between defenders increased, the midfield became harder to compact, recovery runs became longer, and England's attackers suddenly found themselves operating in larger and larger spaces. This is where tournament football becomes ruthless. One small tactical imbalance can become a huge problem. One extra yard of space can become a goal. And eventually, England delivered the knockout punch. Marcus Rashford came off the bench and scored the fourth goal. Now, on the surface, it was simply another goal. But tactically, it represented something much bigger. It showed the value of squad depth. For 70 or 80 minutes, Croatia had been dealing with Kane, Bellingham, Madueke, Gordon, and England's relentless attacking movement. Then, just when tired legs were starting to appear, England introduced another dangerous attacker. That's brutal for defenders. It's like surviving 3 rounds against a heavyweight boxer and then discovering they get to bring in a fresh heavyweight for round 4. The scoreboard moved to 4-2. The match was over. The points belonged to England. But the story doesn't end there. Because the most interesting question isn't whether England won. The most interesting question is what this performance tells us about their chances in the tournament. And honestly, there are reasons for both optimism and concern. Let's start with the positives. England's attacking potential is frightening. Harry Kane scored twice and looked like the tactical heartbeat of the team. Jude Bellingham controlled huge moments of the match and once again showed why many people consider him one of the most complete midfielders in world football. Madueke caused constant problems. Rashford provided impact from the bench. England created chances from multiple areas of the pitch. That's exactly what elite tournament teams do. When one route isn't working, they find another. But now let's talk about the warning signs. Because there were warning signs. Croatia scored twice. Croatia consistently found opportunities in transition. Croatia exposed gaps behind England's press. Against stronger opponents later in the tournament, those moments become even more dangerous. A team like France, Argentina, Brazil, Spain, or Germany doesn't need many opportunities. Give elite teams 2 or 3 good transition moments, and they can punish you severely. I'm almost certain Thomas Tuchel will spend more time analyzing the goals England conceded than the 4 they scored. That might sound strange, but elite coaches are obsessed with fixing weaknesses. And England's biggest weakness in this match was defensive balance. The attack looked excellent. The control wasn't always there. Now let's give Croatia proper credit before we finish, because despite the defeat, there were encouraging signs. Martin Baturina was excellent. Petar Musa took his chance well. Luka Modric still showed flashes of the quality that has defined an extraordinary career. And Croatia demonstrated something they've shown for years: resilience. Many teams would have collapsed under England's pressure. Croatia kept fighting. They kept responding. They kept making England earn every advantage. Unfortunately for them, England simply had too much firepower. So what's the final verdict? England deserved to win. The scoreline was fair. The attacking quality was undeniable. But this wasn't a flawless performance. It was a reminder that England can overwhelm opponents offensively while still leaving questions defensively. And in some ways, that's what makes them such a fascinating team to watch. Because if Tuchel can tighten the defensive structure while maintaining this attacking threat, England won't just be contenders. They'll be one of the teams everyone else desperately hopes to avoid. And after watching this 4-2 victory over Croatia, I think the rest of the World Cup just received a very loud warning. England's attack has arrived. The question now is whether the defense can arrive with it.